What's up, everyone? I'm here with Alex Claffy. Alex, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Of course, man.
How are you?
I'm doing well. A little tired, but
Yeah, because we were just talking about the tour that you just came back from. How was it, and what's in store for you in the next few weeks here?
the tour was great. It's always a pleasure to work with people like Seamus, who's one of my heroes, and Ben Jensen, and just great bands all around. We did the Black Cat in SF, Duke de Lombard in Paris, the Hot Club of Lyon, and then Hanita Jazz and Heist d'Est Opdesberg, Belgium, which was great. And it was fantastic. It was really always a learning experience, and great to play my music for some amazing crowds across Europe. But let's see. Well, tonight begins the Django Jam. I did that for about 2 years in New York City, and it's back up tonight. We have Aaron Goldberg and Ofri Nehemia, and I'll be playing with the Josh Evans Big Band before that. But a couple dates with my own band, the Cape May Jazz Festival, the Exit Zero Jazz Festival, Cape May, New Jersey, and a couple gigs in Philly. I'll be working with Joey DiFrancesco a little bit later this year, as well as Seamus and Kurt Rosenwinkel at the end of the year. So, and Steve Miller too, actually, here with the Patrick Bartley Sextet, which would be really cool. So, yeah, it's going to be a great year. I'm super pumped about it.
Right on. Yeah, I'm super pumped to check everything out. So you're originally from Philadelphia, right?
Yeah. Originally from Westchester, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour outside of Philadelphia, and I grew up in the Philly jazz scene, with a lot of people like Orin Evans and Mike Boone and Sid Simmons, Mickey Roker. All these people were kind of, huge influences and really helpful mentors to me. And all the Philadelphia, like Kurt and everybody else, Christian McBride, they've all been, the Philly crew, we stick together for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. So tell me a little bit about what your family was like. Were your parents musicians?
Yeah, they're both still musicians. My father is he's a pianist kind of in the Broadway style and worked a lot of private events, but had a really deep knowledge of the American songbook. And my mother was a talent agent and a vocalist. So really Broadway, grew up super Broadway. That's something me and Benny Benack really share. We love to talk about.
Right.
Our upbringings are pretty similar in that regard. Sorry, I'm just fixing an issue with charging. Give me 1 second.
Sure.
Okay, we'll figure that out. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so very musical theater kind of household, and focused a lot on Gershwin and Cole Porter and all different sorts of stuff like that. So I was really lucky to come up around the songbook, and then there were some jazz records kind of laying around, and got into fusion. I was a rocker, I still am. Loved Cream and Led Zeppelin and all that stuff. And then I found out about, Maynard Ferguson came to my high school, and our band director, Scott Litzenberg, he knew what was up. So we all got to go see Maynard, and it was killing. And then, got into Weather Report and Jocko, and one thing led to another. And then I was like deep into, Coltrane live in Japan. It's just all kind of, it's beautiful. It's a great thing about music. I know you know that as well as anybody else. So yeah.
Most definitely. Was bass your first instrument?
No, it wasn't actually. I played piano. Well, I sang first. I was, singing and like tap dancing and doing stuff like that, acting, and then I played piano, and then I played trombone for a while, which Lord knows did not last because I didn't have the air support. I was pretty sad. But then I found out about, I'd already been playing piano, but I got a little bit more serious, and I played a little guitar. And then my friends were forming like a prog band. We loved, actually, some of them are still playing. One of them is this guy, Matt Block, who's one of my dearest friends and works in music licensing. And the other is this guy, Jason Matthews, who's a part of this band called Electric Kiff out of Miami that's pretty well known. And we just had this prog band, and they needed a bass player. So I just went down to the local guitar shop, and I picked up a bass, and I was like, bum, 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 bum. And I was like, okay, I can do this. Cool.
And it was electric bass?
Yeah, electric bass, this like 4-string Fender with a, fucked up neck. It was great. And here we are,
Yeah. Do you remember like the first time that you were introduced to jazz? Was it at a very, very young age, or was it after you had formed the prog band, or was it before and the interest kind of developed over time?
Well, I think I had heard a lot of it, and I had been playing electric bass. At that point, the story I just told, I was probably about 13, and I started doing like the local jazz programs. But I had heard a lot of that stuff. And my dad, he was friends with like Mike Boone and Steve Beskar, these bass players who had played with, Joe Henderson and all these different people. So, and Giant Steps, I knew about Giant Steps. I didn't know about jazz, but I knew about Giant Steps. I knew it was really hard,
Right.
Giant Steps is really hard. John Coltrane, I know he's from Philadelphia. I knew all these things, but I knew all the songs. I just didn't really know them as jazz songs, which was interesting. And then really it was when my interest, I think people had definitely tried to show me jazz, but I just couldn't hear anything else besides Cream and, like Sabbath, and I didn't want to hear anything else. And then once I was like, oh, Coltrane, this has like the same hot, like the energy's hot, it's like that music. Like I like it, and I was listening to like, One Down, One Up, I think was like the first one that I got. And I was like, whoa, just blew my brain out of my skull. So yeah. And then being in Philly around that time was great too, because people were coming through all the time. Like Orin was bringing in bands with J.D. Allen and Revis and Nasheed. And then the next week, I got to see Kurt with that band with Aaron Parks and Kendrick, and it was Joe Martin that night, although Ben Street had been playing in the band round. And, Chris Potter, I remember Chris Potter came to Chris's, and it was like, oh my God, Donnie McCaslin with Mike Moreno, a lot of guys that I play with now, which is pretty cool, but it just blew my mind. So it was right there in front of me. Ari Honig and Kenny Werner came once, and it was like, oh my God. Brian Blade Fellowship, got to see them. It was a good time in Philly for live music.
Yeah, I lived in Philly for 3 years, and it just has such a rich musical history, and the scene is really strong over there. So those are some of the best years of my life, I would say. And there's just so many great musicians, like you've been talking about, that are from Philly. People like Coltrane or other people that went on to be really, really famous. But then there's also so many Philly musicians that still live in Philly and still work in Philly that are, of the same caliber of musicianship as a lot of other people that maybe got more notoriety. So all around, just a great city, I would say. I really enjoyed living there. So was music always a singular focus for you, or did you ever have like any other aspirations to be like a, I don't know, firefighter, or like any other occupation, or was it kind of just always on track for music?
It's funny. It kind of seems to me, the more that I look in retrospect, or retrospectively, I should say, is that it was always music. It was always music. But there's also part of it that I really wanted to be a special education teacher. I was really interested in that. I really have always connected with autistic kids and anybody with disabilities, and I have a real soft spot, and I really would like to do more. I've done some work with this organization, Music for Autism, and I'll tell you, those are the best gigs I think I've ever done. To feel like you're making that kind of difference, because the way that a lot of mentally disabled or handicapped, not disabled, handicapped, I should say, people, and autistic people in general connect with music, and the way it affects them is amazing. And the way they can affect the music too, it's really just beautiful. So that's really been the only other thing that I've thought about doing, although I've been told I would have a talent to be a lawyer, because I put up a hell of an argument.
I love it.
Yeah, so, but pretty much just music, that's all I could ever think about doing. And it's, I was in school, I was flunking out in high school. I was just music. I wasn't one of these like all straight honors AP classes. Like, it was just music. That was it.
So you're like 13, you're playing in a prog band, and then you mentioned you started to get into kind of like jazz programs at your school, maybe, or like some of the local Philly programs. When did jazz become more of a singular focus? Did the prog thing kind of continue through middle school and high school, or did it kind of switch over?
We were always into it. We were always listening to it. I'm still listening to Yes. I'm still, Dave Kikowski's telling me about what Gentle Giant records to check out. Like, people, it's always a part of you, but then it started to become more jazz, because I needed to learn more songs, and I needed to know more of the tradition, and I needed to learn upright, and I needed to. So yeah, it became more of a central focus for sure at that point.
So you're in high school, you're playing bass, probably playing gigs already at that point, right?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah. So
go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So you're in high school playing gigs. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the people that you were playing with at that time that were kind of your peers, and what that time was like for you?
It was a beautiful time. The first people I met were, let's see, I'm trying to think of it in order, was a great piano player named James Santangelo, who still leads the jam session at Chris's Jazz Cafe and plays there with his own bands. And this great tenor player, Kevin's son. They were all at the UArts pre-college program, and they were just monsters, just tearing through Moment's Notice and all 12 keys. And Tony Maselli, the vibraphone player, was training us at that camp, and then later on at the Settlement Monday night music class. Yeah, Jordan Howe, great drummer. Mike Stephenson, now he goes by Sunny Step, great singer. We still play together. Dahi Devine, composer and saxophone player, one of my dearest friends. And then Justin Faulkner, who was then just getting picked up by Branford Marsalis and was already kind of on the road and doing it. And we were all like, wow, this, and everybody was amazed by Justin. So that's around the time when I met Orin Evans and Mike Boone and Sid Simmons and John Swana and all these people, and just would go anywhere there was music, anywhere there was live music. I'd go there every night and try and play, or just listen most of the time. I was too scared to play, and then I would start to play, and then I started to get hired, and that's right when I switched over to Upright. It all happened at once.
So you kind of mentioned that you weren't that great of a student. How did your parents take that? Were they kind of okay with it because they saw your direction, or did they give you a hard time?
Well, my parents were cats, so they didn't want me to be a musician. They did not. They loved that I loved it, but they did not. They were really, you need to get an education degree. You need to do this. You need to butter that. And I was just defiant. I was utterly defiant. I was like, fuck that. I'm going to do my thing. Pardon my language. I'm going to do that, and do my thing and play. And I resisted them until I got pretty much, I wasn't going to be, able to afford to go to a school like the new school. That's not the kind of family I grew up in that could just afford that. And I had a pretty good deal worked out at William Patterson University. And at the last second, the new school called and really made a great, generous scholarship offer, which I'm still grateful for, thanks to Reggie Workman, Mr. Workman, who had come to see me play at the Philadelphia Clef Club, where I had met all of those people after the New Orleans thing. Down the street is the Clef Club of Jazz, which I cannot forget to thank. Jonathan Blake went there, Jaleel Shaw, all under the directorship or direction of Lovett Hines, Mr. Hines, who runs the organization, and many great teachers. Eric Lewis spent time there, Ari Honig, I think Kurt at certain points, Christian McBride, amazing organization. So from Miss Reggie Workman hearing me play there, I was able to get a scholarship and attend the new school. And at that point, I was roughing it in New York. I didn't have any money, and they were worried about me for a while. And it's obviously not the most glamorous lifestyle financially that you can choose, but I'm surviving, and I'm still standing almost 10 years later in New York and still playing. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, definitely. Did you finish at the new school?
I did. I dropped out for a year because I went on the road. I went out with Bruce Harris's quintet. I didn't even tell him that I dropped out to go to a Jazz at Lincoln Center, Doha, which was great, with Jerry Weldon and Evan Sherman, great band. And then I went onward to finish. A year later, I went back and I finished one last semester. It's great.
Gotcha. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about the classes that you were taking there, what their kind of structure is? Because I've heard, new school is a little bit different the way that the program's structured. And so can you tell me a little bit about what the classes were like? Who you were hanging out with? Did you go to class? That sort of thing.
Yeah, totally. People flat out on the table, and I'm sure a lot of new school alums will tell you this, and teachers, people have a lot of mixed feelings about the new school because it's not the most traditional setup. There were things that definitely frustrated me, for sure, and I can be open about those things. There were also a great deal of amazing things about that school. First of all, the location. You're in Greenwich Village. You have a place to practice and have sessions in Greenwich Village. You have access to, once you pass proficiency, like some of the greatest teachers in the world. So I was squeaking by pretty much and doing everything I could to get good grades, but I was also working full time, and I was, in the beginning, commuting back and forth to Philly to make a living, and also, learning how to be 18 and, romantic interests. I mean, everything you go through when you first go to college. Not that it's an excuse, but I was more focused on smalls. I really wanted to learn at smalls. Spike, Spencer Murphy and Stacy and Lawrence, God rest his soul, and everybody else was so cool and were really taking me in and training me in a way to have a real in the streets, and I could have, I could have definitely lightened up in my attitude back then. I think I was a little crusader of jazz, like, you need to be hanging at small, you need to, which I still feel is the truth, but if you're living in New York and you want to learn about jazz music, you need to be a part of the scene. But back then I was very like hard on my peers. Why aren't you guys hanging out? But so that I had an interesting relationship with the student body at certain points because I was like, anti-authority and thought that everybody should be down on 10th Street taking their lesson from Johnny O'Neill. And that's most of what I was doing. Barely staying afloat in school so I could do that. And then in school, when I had the great opportunities, when somebody like Richie Byrack would come in, or Steve Cardenas was teaching, and I got to hang out with Doug Weiss and study with, Mr. Carter, Sir Ron Carter. And it was just great. The resources were, if you wanted them, they were there. Study with Jimmy Cobb,
Mm-hmm.
have a rehearsal there with Lawrence or Jason Brown before they played a gig in the Village and learn from them. It was really fantastic.
Yeah. So after you graduate, what would you say? You're basically living in New York, and when did it kind of switch over from you from mostly going back to Philly for gigs until you started to work in New York a little bit more? You mentioned going on the road with Bruce Harris. Can you just tell me what the kind of transition was like from being in school to being out of school?
It's I was kind of always out of school. I was kind of hanging out every night, so I was trying to lay the groundwork. If push had come to shove, I think by the end of year one, I could have really survived without a school roof over my head. I think I was already in that position, whether it was me and Matt Chalk playing in the park, or, my second year, Kyle Poole and I doing tap jam every week. We made it by and we made it work. And because we love the music, and we still do. But the transition point of stopping the trips back to Philly just became, as I developed as a musician, people started to take more of a chance on me and hire me for stuff. So then, naturally you're treated a little bit better, and maybe you get paid a little bit better, maybe, and then you don't have to come back and do certain things you don't want to do. And I'm very young. I'm 27, so I'm still exploring that end of it. But yeah, it was great. Eventually, I just started getting called more in New York because I was getting better. Simple as that. People are kind and they take a chance on you, and you learn more. And then as long as you keep getting better, people always want to call you.
Yeah, absolutely. What were the main differences that you found right away between New York and Philly? Because they're both great cities, but obviously New York is a lot bigger. So was there any things that you noticed about the scene?
Well, New Yorkers are tough. Philly is a tough place to live. It's dangerous, and I grew up out in the burbs, but for all, musical purposes, I was hanging out downtown. I think that there's more of a tightly knit family vibe in the Philadelphia jazz scene. I think that because there are so many people in New York, a lot of people wind up being your acquaintances, and you do have a lot of really good friends. And I have a lot of really close, people that I'm closer with in New York maybe than I am in Philly. But it's more of a family vibe in Philly because it's a big small town, and the elders watch after you closer. Somebody's quick to pull your coattail if you're doing something that they think is fucked up, and it's a lot easier that way to regulate yourself. Whereas New York is wide open, and there's more diversity in the types of jazz that's being played. There's more diversity in everything. It's just more open, and people from here, and you meet somebody from Israel and they're playing this kind of thing. You meet somebody from Czechoslovakia and they've got this, or wherever. It's just more international. So naturally the music is more international, and there's more to explore. Now with the internet, you can get anything anywhere, but at least when I first got there, I was just meeting people from all over the world. It was the most amazing thing. You don't meet people like that every day in Philadelphia. Maybe you meet them every 10th day, by chance. But in the music scene, it was just extremely diverse musically and personality wise and age wise and everything. It's great. It's just constantly refreshing and scary too, because people are playing at the highest level in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. If you had to go back and give 18-year-old Claffy advice about practicing, or about hanging, or about just general life path? Do you have anything that you would say to yourself?
I would say to not freak out about everything and realize that, things come as they come, and to continue to work hard. But I don't think I would have done it any other way so far. I don't think so. I don't think there would have been any other way to do it.
Yeah.
And, definitely I would have saved a little bit more money. And, yeah, there's a pile of things on a personal note, but musically, I'm very happy with it. And I think I chased exactly what I wanted, and I'm still chasing exactly what I want.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about your band in its current form, and kind of the history of the configuration, I guess, and what the motivation has been to put the band together, and just all that sort of stuff.
Totally. Well, it all kind of started with these gigs at Why Not Jazz Room, which is not even there anymore, which is on Christopher, I believe, right near the 55 bar. And Ben Yunson and I had become real good buddies because we had met at some of the late night jam sessions and hung out with Kush Abaday, and we had all these friends in common, Arnold Lee, different people. And I was writing this music, and I was thinking about, Jonathan Barber and I were really good friends. He was playing in the band at that time, and Mike King and Victor Gould. And I wanted to find a way to incorporate everybody. And I was writing these songs, and people in school were like, man, you got to record these songs. They're beautiful. And I had never thought that it would be possible. But, through the cooperation of my friends, and upon meeting Michael Perez Cisneros, we did a couple gigs, and we went in the studio and we did this record. And this record wound up taking a year and a half longer than I thought. And that's the Claffy 1 record, which I'm tremendously proud of still. Because it was a feat. Some of the lyrics and things weren't even done when we went in to record. And a year and a half later, we came out with a record that I feel is one of the best mixes, at least, that I've heard in the past 10 years. And that's got nothing to do with me and everything to do with, Michael, what a fabulous engineer he is. And I really loved him because I went to this recording session with Ben Yunson and Nick Brust, and we recorded, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm the guy that did hardcore. And I was like, hardcore? That's like my favorite. So he had worked with Kurt, and Kurt's records were highly influential on anybody growing up in Philly at that time. Anybody growing up in jazz across the world, for that matter. So the concept from the band just came from, I like the mid-range sound of a lot of chords, or a thick chord rather, being played by an organ, a piano, and a guitar, that and then also having a voice that could carry the melody, and melodies that people would remember. But while not necessarily, while I loved Robert Glasper and the Dilla stuff, I felt that many of my peers were drifting towards that as being home base.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that in my end, from where I was in Philly, it was either straight up pocket, if I was going to go that way, with like no skip beat kind of thing going on, rock and roll and swing. And that was, and modern stuff like what Kurt and Aaron Parks had put out. That's the stuff that I really connected with. So, and the Fellowship Band, that was really what Ben Yunson and I could bond over. Was, wow, the beauty of the Fellowship Band is just incredible, which in turn, of course, is Kurt and such, that band. So we did a record, and then we've been playing in New York ever since, off and on, whenever I've had downtime with less sideman stuff or supporting artist stuff, rather. I do it all as much as I can. And this was the first European run, and we've had some really good success. The song that came out that Kurt played on a few months ago, Tasia, it got some nice attention, and from there we've gotten a couple festival things, and it's all starting to take off. But it's always, I'm playing with other people, and I'm trying to manage it all. So we don't play as much as I'd like, but lately it's been a lot more than usual. So I'm very happy about it, and it's an ever-changing concept. Whatever I'm taking in, I'm listening to Pet Sounds a lot lately, and then I turn on some Horace Parlan, whatever it is. It's always informing the sound of the band, for sure.
Can you say a couple words about what it's like working with Kurt? Because he's just such a big name at this point, and he is obviously very, very well known for having a great ear and a great sense of musical sensibilities and that sort of thing, which is partly why he has so much notoriety, I guess might be the right word. Can you just say a few words about what it's like working with him and playing with him? Because a lot of people would love to know, because he doesn't do that many interviews.
Yeah. well, there's the French one, which is funny that we all laugh about, right? And I've had a good laugh with him over that. I can speak to my assessment of Kurt is that he's an absolute genius. He's one of the most talented people, but more importantly, one of the most hard-working musicians I've ever met in my entire life, and has an undying love for the music that never ceases to amaze me, and an undying love to, no matter where we are, where we're playing, to get it right and to get it sounding absolutely, exactly the way that he wants. And it's amazing, and it's always inspiring to work with him. And it's hard to describe. I mean, you don't really meet many people like that in your life. And I know that I'm very, very fortunate to work with him. He's a master composer. I've studied his compositions inside and out. I've studied his bands and his improvisation. And for me to get to play with him is always a total, it's like, wow, finally getting to play, or not finally, but I'm getting to play with Kurt, because I say, because as a kid, that was the dream for all of us from Philly. It's like, wow, Kurt Rosenwinkel, and it's still that way sometimes, but he's also a very, very dear friend and just a great guy, and really, funny as hell. And yeah, it's amazing, how somebody can just keep getting better and getting better and getting better when you think they've already hit the limit. I feel he's like the John Coltrane of our time. So that's what I pretty much have to say about Kurt, and I love him dearly.
Wow. Yeah, that's a very high compliment. And I think he's very well deserving of that compliment. So is most of your time spent now, or most of your income generated by playing gigs and touring, or is it, do you teach privately at all, or how does that kind of picture look for you?
It's like shameless self-plug. Hey kids, I teach lessons on, TikTok and Instagram. Still playing most of the time, which is great, which I realize is not the case for everyone. So I'm super grateful for that. Yeah, always trying to play. It's great. And touring in New York, it's no secret, most musicians make their money outside of New York and bring it back in. But a lot of guys work in town, and I'm fortunate enough to do both. But I just spoke, right before I spoke with you, I was doing a Skype lesson as well. So I do lessons and master classes, and weddings and bar mitzvahs and plumbing, and if you need your carburetor fixed on your car. I'm kidding, of course. Yeah, you have to do a myriad of things to keep the cashola coming in. So, but right. Yeah, playing all the time, playing other people's music, which is the shit. It's amazing.
Tell me a little bit about what your practicing looks like at this point, because you're obviously a very busy guy between gigs, and I see you touring quite extensively. And so, how does a tour interfere with your practicing? And then how does your practicing look when you're back home?
Anytime sleep is number one. Like today, I had to run to Philly for a little thing and then run back, and I was up at 3 a.m. and interesting day, but yeah, sleep is number one for me. Try and get sleep. And if there's a lot of weeks where I don't sleep on end and I'm on the road, and if I know I can't sleep, then I go to the venue early because of jet lag, and I practice. And then if I know I'm don't have the energy to practice, I sit in bed with a pair of headphones. You're just always finding every day is a new day. As the spiral staircase said, every day is a new day. So you just find a different way to compensate for the lack of whatever it is. Oh, I didn't eat enough today. I didn't get enough sleep. I didn't practice enough. But for years in new school, I was trying to practice like 8 or 9 hours a day, every day, ruthlessly. And if I can, I will. I'm just waking up from a little siesta post Skype lesson. I have my little D'Angelico right here, and I'm just trying to run scales or whatever it is. So whenever in the cracks, when I'm walking down the street, I'm usually listening to a new record or a recording of myself and taking mental notes and critiquing that. So that's the fun of it for me, actually.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think are the most important things that a musician should think about when they're trying to make a living in New York or anywhere else, especially with the whole kind of rise of digital media and social media and all these sort of things? And so is there any particular way that you think about it?
Yeah, well, all the great jazz musicians in history were very active on Instagram, and they had, PR, and they dropped, millions of dollars into PR, and they got the best haircuts. Okay, I'm just joking around. I have to make fun of it because we all know as musicians in this age that it's pretty ludicrous how things operate and how people, if you're really somebody who truly loves, I won't even say jazz, or because Nick paid me to kill me, but BAM or whatever you like to call music. I'm putting that discussion aside to get to the point of the ways people are ascending to the top of the game and making the most money has always been kind of whack. So you need to prioritize your proverbial you, exactly what you want to do. Do you want to be killing? Do you want to make money? Do you want to, play with the greatest people you can play with? Do you want it all? And so for me, I can only speak for me personally, in that I really, I want to have a nice life where I'm able to afford food and stay healthy and have a roof over my head, but I really want to make great music. And I had this discussion with Seamus Blake the other day on the road. It's like, I'm really the happiest when I'm making great music. So if I really need to make great music, then I need to practice. I need to have a regimen. I need to take care of myself. I also need to be, seen by the public and have a social media presence and go out to the clubs and hang out on a night off and let people know that I'm in town. There's different parts of it, and they're all a part of the puzzle. And if you choose to ignore one part of the puzzle, maybe your life, the quality of your life will improve or decrease. It's hard to tell, but I just trying to be well-rounded, essentially. And
Yeah, I
that's
think
what
that, yeah,
musicians
go ahead.
yeah.
Yeah, being well-rounded is an absolute necessity, and not even necessarily only well-rounded in terms of your playing, but also just well-rounded in terms of everything that you now have to do as a musician. So it's not the days anymore where you can just get a recording contract and the recording label will book a tour for you or give you like a stipend to be able to go out on the road or whatever the case may be. It's very much DIY at this point. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that being well-rounded is very, very wise. Would you agree?
I think it's the only way to be,
Mm-hmm.
or else you're going to be, struggling. Even for the guys I know who I look up to who are, practicing their asses off and doing all their own management, like somebody comes to mind is like Jeremy Pelt. I mean, he's just works his ass off, and he's one of my favorite musicians. Um, you know, he's still working on new ways to be on the road and to get around the road and to do things. And he openly talks about that. And he's very successful. But the guys who are the most successful are constantly working on a way to be better. And that's essentially the point that I'm getting to.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you've been on quite a number of tours at this point. And so one thing that people always talk about when they're talking about tours are how it's kind of in some ways a double-edged sword, right? Because on the one hand, you're playing great music, hopefully in a very great venue with amazing musicians that you like to hang out with. On the other hand, touring is obviously very, very physically exhausting, and it can be very difficult when you have planes to catch and all that sort of thing. So can you just tell us a little bit about how you think about touring? Is it pretty much always worth it for you? Do you enjoy doing it? Would you like to do more or less of it?
There have been very, 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 very few experiences where I've gone out on the road and thought that wasn't worth it. Probably could count less than on one hand, less than 5 times for sure. You always learn something. It's always worth it. It's always an amazing experience and privilege to be able to travel. But yeah, you need to assess the situation. Can I not, if I can't have a drink tonight, I need to wake up early for a flight, or I need to drink a lot of water because I've been on these flights where, we're playing, like the other day I played on French radio as soon as I landed. Okay, what do I do? Okay, during the flight I need to sleep at this time, to make sure I'm up at this time, and then get a cup of coffee right before the flight lands, and then be listening to a record. I mean, there's just, and I think it's actually, for me, maybe I'm odd, but it's kind of the fun of it, is the regimen of it. And it's draining. It's definitely draining, and you need to have a nice bed to sleep in when you get, and try and make sure your accommodations are the best they are, which sometimes they're not great, and you have to make do with that too. It's always a learning experience, and I'm always grateful for it.
Kind of going along with that, how would you describe a performance situation that is ideal? What are things that you look for when you're trying to book a gig, and what are things that you like the venue to do that make it as easy as possible for you to do your job?
Well, I used to get more skeeved out by like backline basses being messed up and stuff like that. But you just always have to play. I think now I've gotten to the point where even when the situation's not ideal, you're learning. It's a steep learning curve, and you're learning how to make it through the event or the concert and play your best somehow. I've heard stories about some of the greatest bass players in the world playing on, on something that's literally considered not a bass, or a piano player is playing on a piano where it's missing strings inside and out of tune, and they play to the strengths of the piano. I mean, it's always a story of triumph in some way with the greatest guys. But the things that can be great is, like, first of all, a little bit of snacks backstage, because everybody's hungry, right? You're coming off the road. Nice couch to lie down on, good bass, sound engineer that's agreeable. Yeah, there's just a bunch of different stuff, and a full house and a great audience and a listening room and a good sounding room. But you're not going to have that every night. So now what I've tried to been, is to focus on the days where it's not so great. How can I make this the best, and how can I learn from that?
Yeah, I think that is beautifully said, and there's it's important to have that sort of, just those little things that make it a more pleasurable experience when you're on tour. And so I think that is very well said. And so my other question is, when you are working as a sideman, which you've also had the opportunity to do quite a bit in a lot of different contexts, what are the main things that you think about when you're focusing on someone else's music and trying to make it the best for their band as opposed to your own projects?
Well, when I was young and more naive, I really was convinced that it was all about me all the time, and my sound and my thing, which it is, in a way it is. It's your sound, it's your thing. But the greatest guys could just fit into any situation with their sound and bring that ensemble to its highest performing level. And really getting to spend time around Sir Ron Carter, my biggest hero, Mr. Carter, it really taught me that the way you can assert yourself into an ensemble and not necessarily take control, but to guide an ensemble to great elevated heights of musicality and dynamics and energy and all that sort of stuff. But then above that, sometimes you feel that way, and the composer or the band leader feels it has to be done this way. I'm also, sometimes I'll defer. Okay, this is what you need. You want this? You're sure? Okay, this note looks funny to me, but maybe it's not my choice. And then most of the time, gigs later, I'll understand. I'll say, oh, okay, it's an F sharp there because it makes sense. I get it now. I see it your way. So I just always try and respect the band leader and try and maybe help them hear something that they never heard before in the bass chair, and an energy in the band and a feeling in the band that they've never had before, but while trying to be as precise as possible and be as proficient as I possibly can with the music itself.
Absolutely. And so can you just recap for us one more time what you have going on? You have you have Claffy 1 that's been out for a while now, and then is Claffy 2 out?
It's coming back out. It's actually coming. Sorry to interrupt you. Claffy 1 is coming back out on LaReserve Records soon. That's why I look so tired today, because I've been doing emails setting that up. Claffy 2 comes out ahead of Claffy 1, actually, which is pretty funny. Even though Claffy 1, you can find it on YouTube and certain spots, it's still hanging around. Comes out on iTunes, Spotify, all that kind of stuff. There's a few singles out, including The Windmills of Your Mind and Lucy and the Scout of Diamonds and Tassia. Those are all out. But there's the full album comes out November 1st. I have a record out also called Standards, What Are You Doing the Rest of Your Life, on SMK, a part of Smoke Sessions Records, that features Kurt Rosenwinkel and Dave Kukowski and Betty Benack and a bunch of other people, Veronica Swift, Joel Fromm. And then I am working on a live record that may be released within the next year, and I'll have to keep those details a little secret, but it features some of my compatriots that I've mentioned previously, and hopefully it's going to come out, but it's a bad motherfucker, so I hope it does come out. And I'm also on great French tenor player John Boutelier. Look out for his release at the top of the year, featuring Kirk Lightsey and Kyle Poole and myself, and a couple other records that'll be coming out soon. Ada Ravati, I'm on a record with her called Brecker Plays Ravati with Randy Brecker. That's coming out soon with Adam Rogers and Jim Beard and a bunch of Dave Kukowski and a bunch of different people. So, yeah.
Awesome. Where is the best place or places to find you and to find what you're doing, find your tour dates, all that sort of stuff? Is it Facebook? Is it your website? Just tell us where to find you.
I'm pretty active on Instagram if you want a good laugh. It's at Claffy, CLAFFY twice. And then if you want to find my tour dates and stuff like that, just go to claffyclaffy.me and you'll find everything. Facebook's good too.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, we covered a lot of ground. I really appreciate your insight. It's been a total pleasure. And I think that your perspective on all these topics is going to provide a lot of value to the audience. So thank you so much for coming on. Stay on the line for 1 second, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you, man.